I was asked, to my audience, okay, I was asked to moderate this debate, and as I understand it, and you can both correct me if I'm wrong, the premise of the debate is who has been a better president, Trump or Biden? So that's what we're going to be talking about. I have a few areas that I think would be interesting to explore, such as domestic policy, foreign policy, and then just overall for the health of the country and the social fabric of America. I think those would be the three interesting places to go. But for the most part, I'm going to let you both kind of guide this discussion, and I will jump in on two conditions. One, I don't understand what you're saying, and I need clarification. And two, if you're both yelling and screaming over each other, or if you've been on a 15-minute monologue, I don't understand what you're saying, and I need clarification. Any questions before we begin?
Yep. Just the same thing as always, Wick. Like if my internet cuts out, it just Starlink has a tendency to do that sometimes. So if I cut out, that happens. That's the only thing I'm gonna bring up. So I'm not like gonna duck out and stuff like that,
Okay.
Yep.
Anything from you, Rob?
Now, yeah, just quick question. Wick, if you're going to cut in every time you don't understand anything, I think that'll get a little onerous.
Okay,
yeah. So, no, I'm good. I'll be all right.
Okay. No, see, I'm glad that your illness hasn't affected your cleverness. Look, gang, I'll just say this straight up, right? Look, you guys know I'm a Democrat. You guys know I'm paid by Progressive Victory, the progressive evil people, right? But I genuinely like Rob. I think he's cool. But that said, we're going to get into it, and we'll go through it. And again, that counts as my disclosure. I do get a check from Progressive Victory. Everyone knows. Great.
Yeah.
And with that, we are going to flip a coin to see who starts first and call it. Rob, heads or tails?
Tails. I believe you. Heads.
Heads. Okay, I don't know if you can see it.
So what's
Heads.
that mean?
So that means Alex gets right to decide if he's
okay.
going to make the opening statement first or second, just like in football, right? Do you want to go first or second, Alex?
Yep. Yeah. Okay. I like I said, it already started. So, Robbie can go first because I'm not gonna have much of an opening statement. So,
Opening statements. Who has been the better president, Trump or Biden? Rob,
Okay.
lead us up.
So maybe I slightly misunderstood the topic. It's okay. We can talk about whatever. It's Trump versus Biden, right? I thought we were talking about who we should vote for in 2024. Basically the same thing, though. I don't know what to say. I think that to me, the debate's not who's been a better president. I think that it is clear, particularly if you take COVID out of the equation, which I had a lot of criticisms of Trump, but those same criticisms, if not more, go to Biden. The country's far better off under Trump than Biden, both domestically and foreign policy-wise. I think that it becomes frustrating to do these debates over and over again with people that are living in that objective reality. Now, you could say, but that's not to do with Trump. The reason things were doing good under Trump's not because of Trump, or the reason things are bad under Biden's not because of Biden. That's fine. We can have that discussion, but there needs to be sort of some baseline. And it just becomes incredibly frustrating when we have to pretend that the economy's not in the shitter. And we can get into the economic debates if we want, or we have to pretend that Biden, one of the things we were told about Trump when we were looking to elect him in 2016 was he was a maverick, a wild card, foreign policy would be disaster, the world would be on fire, and all of those predictions have come true in the exact inverse. We see that now with Joe Biden. I've been very sick this week, so I haven't kept much up on the news. My understanding is Russia is now sending nuclear submarines near Cuba. We may be involved in another Cuban Missile Crisis soon. So the slow march towards incompetence and pooping his pants is leading Biden to getting us closer to World War III than we've been probably since the Cold War. We could talk about three levels that I said that I've been saying why Trump is better than Biden. The first level is domestic policy. I think the economy was better. I think border was better under Trump. Second would be foreign policy, self-evident. Third would be things I would consider scandals and corruption. Hopefully we can get into this because to me that's the biggest issue. If we have a system that doesn't allow our vote to count because there are corrupt people that are running it, and I think Biden is part of that system. He's basically a dementia patient that doesn't know where he's at, and so it's really being ran by the people behind him. I think that that's the biggest issue in the country, but be happy to talk about any and all of those. We'll leave Alex sort of talk about the issues he wants. I'm good.
Well, thank you for being here. We'll get into it as we go, and I hope you feel better during the debate. I can tell you kind of.
All right.
No, Alex, go ahead. Oh well, Wonderful.
Devastating opening statement there by me.
You crushed
Okay.
it.
You froze, buddy.
Yeah, I know. It's gonna do that. You know, Starlink is good. So, okay. So basically, when I look at it, right? When I look at the differences between like the presidencies, we have to be perfectly honest about one thing. Trump was handed a fantastic economy. He was given a great economy, and he took all the credit for it. And then when he left office, he pretty much left Biden with a predicament. He had a pandemic to deal with, a country that was on its way towards a recession, essentially, but we avoided that recession. Unemployment was skyrocketing. Jobs were still leaving and whatnot. And we have to just kind of be realistic about this. You know, we could say like, oh, you know, Trump built the greatest economy, which every expert has actually indicated that's not necessarily true. He had some of the slowest job growth. Like the only president that had better job growth than him was Obama, essentially. But if we're just going to talk about realistic, like why think Biden's been a better president, because when Trump was in office, he complained about how everybody, the entire system was against him. And for 2 years, he had the Republican majority, he had the Senate, he had the White House, and he still complained about not getting stuff done. But the fact of the matter is in Biden's first year, he got the most comprehensive bipartisan infrastructure bill with 45,000 projects underway. Now, infrastructure is one of my top subjects usually. He also got the the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, a lot of people say, oh, it had nothing to do with inflation. Well, actually, in a way, it kind of roundabout did. It talks about like how it created more jobs, it gave more job security for people. A lot of these job opportunities that actually were created, like, for example, windmill jobs were sent to certain areas like where people like Lauren Boebert worked at. Those jobs came to her district, and she tried to take credit for it, especially with the bipartisan infrastructure bill. A lot of people that voted against it said that this was a terrible bill, but then they tried to take credit for the funding, essentially. Foreign policy-wise, I felt it was great that when I'm not okay with the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine, but I think it's just because, and people are going to say, oh, well, why did Russia invade Ukraine? Well, we could probably get into that, but Biden was able to, think before he reacted. He basically united all of NATO and basically denounced Russia for their invasion, their illegal invasion of Ukraine. The only criticism I can have of Biden is the handling of Israel and Palestine. But if we want to get into it, let's go for it.
Okay, and with that, I guess I'll start off by asking that maybe this will help in answering the question.
Sure.
And this is to Rob first. You mentioned that we should leave COVID out of the equation. However, we do have evidence of how Trump handled COVID, and we do have evidence of how Biden handled COVID. So why would it be wrong to compare their handling of this?
When I was saying to leave it out of the equation, it's for two reasons. One, because everyone was a disaster on it. But I'm happy to bring it up if you like, because Trump was better on it than Biden. It'll be the majority of the debate probably once we get down these roads. I'm happy to do it, though. For example, if you look under the same time period like the COVID existed under Trump, those 10 months or whatever, less people died in those 10 months than the first 10 months that Biden was in office. Biden's primary strategy was to use a vaccine that he shit on before he was nominated, said that he wouldn't trust, or implied that he wouldn't trust because Trump was doing it, said the time frame that Trump was suggesting wouldn't work, and then he relied almost solely on that vaccine. Democrats were the ones where Trump sort of took more of a federalist approach and allowed governors to do what they wanted. Democrat governors were the ones that did the worst on it, which were locking down more. It was Democrat institutions or institutions that Democrats cheer for, such as National School Board Associations, etc., that continued to suggest schools be shut down when all available evidence was saying that that shouldn't occur. Now, a study came out this week that said that children are behind decades on their learning, achievement scores, etc., and it's still not improving. Even since the lockdowns have been lifted, something fundamentally changed with these students and the way we did things. And I think you can see that in many people's line of works, including myself, where this work from home mentality that came about as a result of these lockdowns has sort of permeated. And so we're still not in a good position. But I'm happy to discuss the differences if you like. I just thought, because if we look at I think that all of the things I have to criticize Trump for are things that Democrats and people like Joe Biden wanted to do even worse.
Let me try it this way then, because I understand that we can go through any one of these points. For you, Rob, where is the brightest line, the biggest distinction between Trump and Biden that you would like to focus on?
Corruption would be, if you're No one wants that debate, but I mean, if you're asking me what I want to talk about, I want to
That
talk
is
about
what I'm asking you.
I
Yes.
want to talk about how corrupt these institutions are, and Joe Biden's basically just a figurehead of them. But I think that both economically and foreign policy, you can see how the world's on fire. We could look at Afghanistan, we could look at China, we could look at Russia's aggression. I'm happy to look at any of those when it comes to foreign policy. When it comes to domestically, I'm happy to look at COVID policy. I'm happy to look at economic policy. Happy to look at the border policy. I think those are the issues that matter most, and that's not even getting to cultural issues that you see that Biden's, again, beholden to the worst excesses of the progressives. And so, whether it be the crazy Palestinian protesters or, whatever, that's all coming from the Democratic Party. But Alex can take it wherever he wants. It sounds like he wanted to talk about the economy. I'm happy to do that. But Alex, you go ahead, man. You are the one who wanted the debate, so I'll talk about whatever of those issues you want. That's fine.
Well, let's go ahead and talk about Afghanistan real quick, okay? So first things first, okay? When it comes down to the situation of Afghanistan, like what, aside from like we can just, I have no problem saying it was definitely a clusterfuck, but when it comes down to it, like how bad it was, like what was your biggest criticism as far as like the way we left Afghanistan essentially?
They closed Bagram Air Base before we got all of our allies and citizens and equipment back.
Okay. So here's the thing, right? When it comes down to the situation in Afghanistan, a lot of people, like I actually did a panel about this long before we actually left Afghanistan. Now, the thing is should we have like not gotten the troops out like before allies? Yes. But here's the thing. A lot of those government contractors, though, were given plenty of notice for them to actually leave Afghanistan. And some of them actually chose not to, essentially. Was it the right decision for us to leave them? No. However, the Taliban didn't harm any of those American citizens, essentially. Now, the interpreters we did have, unfortunately, were actually killed. Now, when people are very critical about like the situation in Afghanistan, like leaving $80 billion worth of equipment behind, people need to understand that that was 20 years of equipment that we left, and that most of that equipment that we could not, take with us, that we ended up destroying. The rest of it was supposed to be for the Afghan military, and they're the ones that essentially abandoned it. And that's something we have to take into consideration. But I think the realism about the situation is it's not going to matter. You are not going to be able to leave after 20 years of being in that country and smelling like roses. Like it's not practical. I mean, we can't even guarantee that Trump would have done a good job because look at how we abandoned our Kurdish allies in Syria, essentially. Now, I don't want to get into but we can focus on Afghanistan, but it's just, we have to be realistic is that Afghanistan was such a tough situation because Trump did negotiations with the Taliban without the Afghan government there and basically says, hey, listen, we made the negotiations. We're releasing 5,000 Taliban fighters who returned to the fight, essentially, and they returned to the fight and they started capturing territory. Now, we tried to help the Afghan military, but Trump saw that there was no way out. And honestly, people think that we should have stuck around a little bit longer, but Biden stuck to the agreement and he did make kind of a ceremonial day and whatnot. But these are some, I don't want to get Gishgalp into it, but go ahead and give me your thoughts on that.
No, it's fine. Listen, first, I give Biden, I stand almost alone on this, that I give Biden props for actually having the courage to pull out. I think it's something we should have done years ago. I think that, 16 or 17 generals were in charge of our Afghanistan conflict. Everyone told us it was going swimmingly. Victory was right around the corner. The truth is, victory was never achievable. There was never a time where we were close to being able to leave and the Afghan security forces being capable of keeping the country as a strong democracy. It's just not true. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the Afghan security forces outnumbered the Taliban 3-1. They lost in 3 days. And that was with us arming them to the tune of $7 billion of equipment. A couple things you said that I'll take umbrage with. The idea that it was just weapons that we left there that was for the Afghan security forces is not true. There was equipment there that was not designed to be left, but because the planning was so poor, things like Apache helicopters, etc., that we didn't necessarily plan on leaving there, were left. And now it is true that we also left a bunch of weapons that were for the purposes of the Afghan security forces. However, given that it was the estimates that we're now learning that they knew, the generals in the United States knew that the Afghan security forces would fail, then we should have took those weapons because we should not be arming the people that we were told we had to fight 20 years to the tune of $7 billion worth of equipment. And if that was because, well, we left it with the Afghan security forces, but we knew they were going to lose within 2 weeks, I'm sorry, that's not sufficient reasoning. And the buck stops with Biden. He's the one who did it. A couple other things you said, like it doesn't really respond to my criticism of how Biden pulled out. There was a report, for example, in CNN CNN where we had 3 generals or 3 people that were involved in it that were basically told they were picked up in the middle of the night basically and sent to Afghanistan. There was literally no plan. None. Biden had no plan, just sent them there, was like, cool, now get everyone out in a couple days. And it resulted in a disaster. Not only were there 5,000 to 8,000 Americans that were left behind after we ended up going, but we had to rely on the same Taliban that we were told that we had to be there fighting for security. Now, this same Taliban, when we closed down Bagram Air Base, went there and freed the prisoners, some of which were ISIS. ISIS then killed several U.S. troops and a bunch of citizens of Afghanistan by attacking the base that we were relying on the very Taliban that freed ISIS to protect us from them. Joe Biden then had egg on his face and decided to beat his chest by claiming, we struck back, we bombed ISIS-K. If it wasn't for the fact that we had social media, we would have never found out that it wasn't ISIS-K. He actually bombed an Afghan translator and his family. That's what they did. They killed innocent people and bragged about it. We left 78,000 allies, Afghan allies behind, and instead we brought in 70,000 or so refugees that were completely unvetted, many of which probably have ties to the Taliban. So once more, it continues this tradition in the United States where our rights continue to be subverted, Fourth Amendment subverted through things like the Patriot Act. You can't go on airplanes or anything like that without practically being molested. And yet, at the same time, the reason we're given for that is because we're fighting Islamic terrorism. We continue to have basically an open border, or in this case, open flights from Afghanistan, the very area we had to fight in 20 years, with people that we're not vetting just releasing into the country. So it's not the Biden pulled out that's bad. It's the way in which he did it. And it's simple. You don't pull out from a secure air base where military are defending it and just throw up your hands and say, I was meeting Trump's deadline. He tore up all sorts of plans that Trump had on all sorts of issues. And so the fact that we shouldn't blame Biden from this obvious debacle, again, not the decision to pull out, I commend that, but the way in which it was executed was terrible.
Okay, we gotta let him respond. Go ahead, Kirsch.
Yeah, no, that's right. So here's the thing. The criticism is very fair. And, yes, definitely, we definitely bombed like the wrong people. I'm not going to deny that whatsoever. However, the thing I think we need to focus upon the fact is that, again, it's not going to matter. You're not going to be able to pull out of that country after 20 years. And yes, the 13 service members that were killed, absolute fucking tragedy. But the thing is, I think I'm more disappointed with the fact that so many people politicized it, but it's politics. People are going to politicize it. But the equipment that was left behind, now, the reason why so many of the ANA actually surrendered was because the president of Afghanistan bailed. That's going to pretty much kill the morale of all the Afghan military and whatnot. And when it comes down to like us grabbing all of those weapons and, equipment and stuff, the logistics behind that would be an absolute nightmare. Because first things first, even before you leave, right? If you're going to say, okay, listen, we're leaving all this equipment for you behind, right? You're going to be able to use all this stuff. If we decide to renege on that and say, hey, listen, no, we're going to take all this stuff back because we think that you're just basically going to fall apart. I don't think the Afghans were just going to just give us it was like, oh, yeah, sure, you can just take this stuff back. We gave it to them to basically utilize, and what we could destroy, we did destroy, and what we could not destroy, because like some of them were like, I think like you did mention the Apache helicopter. I think, yes, we could have done a lot better as far as like pulling out of there, but it's just, we were just on such a timetable. And a lot of, before you go on, the thing is like, this is not like the first time, like the military tends to like, throw people into situations like this. And I'm not condoning it, having experienced this firsthand. Stuff happens and you just got to react to it. And, there's a lot of people that were out there on the ground. Like I know Dylan Burns talked about how there was people that had no idea what they were there for. But I feel like that's not necessarily just the fault of just Biden, but there was like a huge break in the chain of command essentially. And there's a lot of people that need to, I would say, answer it. But okay, people aren't like asking.
Rook, 2 questions specifically on what you said. You can answer them if you want. You said that what was the name? Was Karzai still the president? Who was
I think his name is.
Okay. So you said the president of Afghanistan, Karzai, left. Whose responsibility was it to know that he was going to flee?
How were we going to know he was going to flee? I think he was.
Wouldn't it be U.S. intelligence under the Biden administration that should have been the ones that knew how capable he was?
Sure, but I don't think anybody predicted that he was just going to up and leave the country. Like also, a lot of intelligence can't always predict like when some situations occur. I mean, if we want to talk about intelligence failing, I mean, that's like a common occurrence.
When did he leave? Before or after the poll?
And just a fact check here, the president was Ashraf Ghani.
Yeah,
Ghani.
Karzai was.
Okay. Yeah.
When did he leave, before or after the pullout began?
I think it was after the pullout began.
I have
If I'm
to
not
check.
mistaken.
I have to check. But
I'm looking.
The other question I have
thinking.
is
Sure.
you say we couldn't have taken the. Do you think the Afghan military, the ANA, would have fought the United States if we were like, hey, we're taking those guns back?
That's the thing. We don't know, but I'm pretty sure they're not going to just let us take them.
Well, they weren't going to fight, right? They weren't going to fight. I could almost guarantee. You want to know how I know that? Because they didn't fight the Taliban. Basically, what you're saying is, well, if we would have taken the weapons back from the ANA, then they really wouldn't have had a chance. So what? Instead of losing in 3 days, they'd have lost in 1? Because basically what they did was submit to the Taliban and hand the guns over to them. So wouldn't it have been better? And shouldn't the United States and the Biden administration have known? Keep in mind, and I've had this debate with people, because I could bring up the quotes if you want of Biden saying, "Oh, trust us, the security forces are going to do well there. They're positioned well to, blah 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 blah." But you agree that the Biden administration knew that was bullshit. They were just blowing smoke up our ass because they didn't want to come out and say, "Yeah, they're screwed. Like, we know it. There's nothing we could do." So Biden's painting a rosy picture. But you agree they knew that the ANA was doomed. They didn't have a chance, right?
So also,
I'm sorry.
not to
I'm sorry.
interrupt, but I'll let you go. But just for some facts here, he fled, and at least in the source I'm reading, as the Taliban closed in on the Sunday, right? So they had already taken most of Afghan, and they were in the capital. He fled on Sunday. Ghani, the president, fled that day after they had started to take the capital. So just a timeline check on that. Anyway, go on.
Yeah. So my only response to that is, we're not going to just, I don't think, do I think the Biden administration probably knew? I don't know. I mean, it's possible, but I'm not really going to speculate as to what they did or did not know. I'm pretty sure that because we've been training the Afghan military and the police for like almost 20 years. And like, when we say that like the Afghan military is not going to attack, that's not necessarily true. There were times like where Afghan soldiers would like attack soldiers. They're called green on blue attacks. And I'm not saying that they would all risen up. I'm simply saying that some might have attacked, and we just want to kind of avoid a situation like that. Now, we felt that, like, I'm pretty sure we felt at the time they could have at least put up a fight, because there were some units that I'm quite certain were capable of fighting. But like, once you've seen all these units just throwing down the weapons, maybe there's like, what's the point anymore? Like, that's just like the perception that I'm gathering from this.
Okay, just last question I have on this. Do you think
Sure.
it would have been more successful if they wouldn't have closed Bagram Air Base?
It's possible, but it's kind of hard for me to say, honestly. It's possible, but I will concede it's possible.
I don't understand the position of like, well, things are always messy. I mean, that's true. No one will deny that, of course.
Yeah, sure.
But I don't understand how this. I mean, there were literally people on the arms of planes, holding on to planes. Our troops were bombed and killed. We had to rely on the very basically military that we'd been fighting for 20 years to provide defense for us. Like, that's shameful. That is a humiliating defeat, and it had serious consequences. Like, it not only signals weakness to the rest of the world, but how would you feel if you're an ally in one of these countries of the United States? Instead of you coming to a place, you're basically left in hell. You know the Taliban's going to execute and torture those people if they could find proof that they were working with the U.S. government. And yet, instead of having a procedure set up to make sure that we brought back people that were our allies, we just brought back 70,000 random people. And we're like, yeah, there you go. Whatever, we got 70,000. We left 5,000 Americans. I mean, I just don't find it sufficient to be like, well, he was following Trump's timeline and things are always messy. I mean, this is a disaster, and I think it sets the stage for what we see, the fecklessness of whether it be Biden or the military leadership underneath him, that it seems as if with Biden in office, we see continued aggression from nations that are hostile to us that don't seem to be intimidated by the U.S. anymore, and in fact seem to think that they could push and push and push, and seems to be getting away with it.
Well, before we move on to the next topic, I don't think anyone's like really pushing us around, because if we look at it, right, people that like might be encroaching, like you brought the point about Cuba, right? Like Russia ships going to Cuba. That's actually been a practice that's been going on from like 1993. I think what the source says is like between 2013 and 2020. So this is like a common practice. So they're not necessarily testing the waters. They're not like provoking us. And like, you know, when people say, oh, fighter jets are closing in on Alaska, that's also been happening for years. It even happened under Trump. people are always going to say, oh, they're testing the waters. They're pushing Biden around. No one's really pushing us around. And the fact of the matter is just like our support and us not getting involved in the current conflicts right now. The only way you're getting involved is through financial means. I don't think anyone's like really testing. And like to close at the point as far as the refugees, people were saying, oh my God, these refugees are going to launch terrorist attacks. So far, none of that has actually happened. And from what we understand, like none of these people, like there might be like one or two people that might do something bad kind of deal. Now, I understand the concern as far as like why we didn't vet these people properly. That's another thing that I can definitely agree we could have done a much better job. I'm not going to like try to hide it, essentially. I mean, if that's fair.
Yeah, I just, I think looking at Trump's record via Biden's on that, I think that pullout is a disaster. As far as countries pushing us, it's not just pushing us, right? It's not like just the posturing towards the United States. It's the posturing as the United States as the hegemony, right? Like, so we are the world superpower with hard power, which is our military, which I think we use far too often. And then also with soft power, which is sort of our economic and cultural power. We were seen as the world police, rightly or wrongly. It's clear that era is coming to an end. It's coming to an end, and it's accelerating under the Biden administration. Now, I'm open to very serious criticism that it's been going that direction for a long time. Now, I think that's fair, but I think it's getting far rapidly worse under Biden. So, for example, the invasion of Ukraine with Russia, or like things that are designed to sort of be humiliating, like the very public Chinese spy balloon that flies across the country that we're told over and over again, well, you can't just shoot it down. You can't do it. That's why they're allowing it to go over all these bases. You can't just shoot it down. And then, of course, they just shoot it down, which, by the way, seems to be a theme with the Biden presidency. We're told over and over that he can't do something, and then when it's too late, he does it, like his executive order on the border. I can't do anything. I can't do anything. Oh, okay, I'll do something now when it's too late. Yeah, I see, for me, I think, and I think this goes, I'll give you a chance to respond then. I think this goes in line with something we see with Russiagate. We were told over and over again that Russia wanted Donald Trump to win the election. Well, it turns out that that's not true, that there was actually intelligence from the CIA that John Brennan himself basically put the kibosh on that said actually Russia, many intelligence sources were saying they preferred Hillary Clinton over Trump because they found her to be predictable. Because the U.S. foreign policy has been predictable for so many years. And with Trump, they just didn't know. And I think that is true about Trump, regardless of what you think of him. You might think that he's an unpredictable shithead, which may be true, but so do our enemies. And so you didn't really want to cross that line. And I think that you see that with Biden as well, where he's just predictable. They know where the line is. They know how far they could go. And I think Afghanistan helped illustrate to the world the United States is no longer this military superpower. I mean, they were humiliated. Absolutely humiliated in Afghanistan, left with their tail between their legs, the force that they'd propped up for 20 years with trillions of dollars lost in 3 days. I don't see how you could look at that on the world stage as anything other than a humiliating defeat.
Yeah. Well, again, I just definitely got to leave it at this, before I move on, because I actually want to hit on one point, but it has nothing to do with Afghanistan though. But like, I have already said that it was definitely a clusterfuck. But I just don't know if Trump could have done a better job. But we're never going to know that. It's just because the way I saw how he reacted to Syria and how we just pulled out of Syria with a quickness. And as a matter of fact, was it John McEntee, who was like his right-hand man, actually tried to type up a memo because after Trump had already lost the election, this is the unpredictableness that I want to talk about with Trump, though. It's just like he wanted to pull all forces out of Afghanistan and out of all the Middle East so John McEntee actually drew up a copy and pasted memo and took it to Donald Trump without consulting any of his advisors, the Joint Chief of Staff, the acting Secretary of Defense, the acting Secretary of the Army, all of his military advisors, people that actually specialize and actually have an understanding about this. And then he signed it. When General Milley heard about this, he's like, that's not going to happen. And he basically put a stop to that because he told Trump, listen, you can't do something like this. Now, to his credit, Trump actually didn't do this. But that's this is why I talk about his unpredictable behavior, because Trump made a lot of legislative and administrative decisions without consulting his advisors, like the discussion of the Helsinki, the discussion in Singapore with Kim Jong-un. He made a lot of decisions of pulling out of Syria without consulting his Secretary of Defense, Mattis, at the time. And that's one of the reasons why Mattis actually left, was because he's making decisions without consulting his advisors, essentially, which is dangerous. I mean, you can't just make rash decisions because I'm the president, I can do whatever I want to. Wouldn't you say that's kind of dangerous?
Well,
I'll let you respond in 1 second, but just housekeeping. The super chats are great. I'll get to them soon. Do not worry. I'm not ignoring you. Okay, that said, and I do have a question for both of you after
Sure.
you respond. Rob,
Okay.
go ahead.
Well, yeah, well, so first, that's non-unique to Biden, right? It's the same thing with Biden, where he, in his pullout, he literally had no plan at all. Like, so at least with Trump, he was talking to people. It might not be the advisors you want. And the proof's in the pudding. Despite what you think about Helsinki, despite what you think about Syria, did any of it lead to any close of the disasters we're seeing now with the Biden administration? No. Foreign policy wise, not even close. And then when it comes to the specifics, I don't give a shit. I think Miley's a traitor. I think he should actually be looked at for possible treason. He admitted that he would have called China if Trump decided that we were going to have conflict with China and would have warned them. That is treasonous to our biggest geopolitical rival, that he would have aided them if it came to a military conflict between the two nations. So I don't care that the same people, for example, you say, oh, these advisors, you have to consult them. They know what they're talking about. Right. The same advisors that had us in Afghanistan for 20 years, 17 generals that told us that we were kicking ass and everything was going well. These advisors have lied to us over and over again. The people who have ran these military industrial complex. They're the ones that told us we needed to go into Libya. How's Libya look now? Terrible. Far worse. It went from a nation that you might not have liked Gaddafi. I was no fan, but it was a nation that was leading Africa in literacy and home ownership to now there's open air slave markets. That's the glory that we did. We've had similar stories of tragedies in places like Iraq. As far as Syria, the very people that were encouraging the United States military presence in Syria were ignoring the signs of how that was pissing off countries like Russia, that we had military stations so close to their country and one of their greatest allies. This whole story of us having a military in Syria made no sense whatsoever because we were supposedly there to fight ISIS, but we were aligning with Al-Qaeda and al-Nusra in an effort to fight ISIS. We were also fighting Assad while we were there. We were told that we couldn't leave because our ally, the Kurds, would have genocide committed on them by our allies, the Turks, where we stationed nuclear weapons. It's a shit show. It's the constant same old bullshit of the United States needs to have military presence in all these countries, axis of evil bullshit that we've been lied to over and over again. Now, should Trump consult with experts more? Sure, I don't mind that criticism, but most of the things I think were bad when it comes to foreign policy or with COVID policy of Trump's because he trusted the experts like Dr. Fauci too much. So now, I don't think, especially when we can see the end results, I'll just ask you a yes or no question. Foreign policy wise, is the world in a better, more stable place today or when Trump was president?
If I'm be realistic, no. I mean, I'm not gonna no, of course not.
Damn, no's good. I want to ask before we move off before we move off the foreign policy side of these things, just a real clear answer, and I want to ask you first, Alex, and I want to ask you, Rob. So I'm just gonna ask, can you name a policy, a single policy from either Biden or Trump that you think demonstrates either a policy victory and demonstrates why whoever your guy Biden is better, or a policy by Trump that demonstrates he's worse? Can you give us a policy, please?
For Biden, a positive, like the best, the infrastructure bill. That's I'm sorry.
No, a foreign policy, like
a foreign policy.
When it comes to like how he dealt with Ukraine or something, right? Just give us your best Biden foreign policy take. Go.
Getting NATO involved to stand against Russia, like that was fantastic. Like that was a great way.
That's his strongest one. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rob, same to you. What's the strongest point that Trump has foreign policy?
He didn't get us in any new wars, right? He was convinced NATO countries to pay more of their fair share for defense because the United States is paying more in it. Even though this is a domestic issue, when it comes to, he made us for the first time a more net exporter of crude oil than Russia, which was something that harmed Russia significantly. So all of those things, his posture foreign policy of basically coddling up to dictators with nice words, but then being aggressive to them, particularly with economic policy, actually kept things in check far more than we could see. And I would disagree heavily with sort of NATO's involvement in Ukraine, which I think is a disaster, particularly for the Ukrainian people that are going to suffer the most because of that.
Okay. Well, with that, let me get through these super chats, and then we'll get to the next section, which is going to be domestic.
Rob, you can go next. You can pick the next topic.
Okay. Well, go ahead with super chats. So that's fine.
Sure. $5 from Cryborn to say, I respect that Rob genuinely cares about corruption. We ignore Biden's history of plagiarism, lying, and inappropriate hair sniffing and pinching. Thank you for the $5. $2 from the Trib 1 to say the live chat is brought to you by PV. Thank you for the $2. $5 from Turtle Emergency to say if it was a disaster, it was the disaster of the person who agreed to a timetable without a plan. Thank you for the $5. And $5 more from the Trib 1 to say question for both at the end. If Trump wins, will the U.S. lose democracy? Also, if he wins, what happens with our current stance on foreign policy? And if you want to answer that, you may. Go ahead.
Yeah, the democracy, the way it's said, the people that are saying that we'll lose our democracy is a euphemism for the institutions that run our country and what they believe. We actually don't have a democracy. Technically, we're a republic anyways, but our vote doesn't matter because these institutions put their thumb on the scale. If you're wondering, if I can make it as simple as this, with Biden, if he's on the side of the institutions and the institutions decide to be corrupt, there is no check on it. If Trump gets in there and decides he's going to say he's not going to leave dirty progressive victory pack people like Wick vote, guess what will happen? Everyone in his administration will go, no, screw that. No, not happening. To the point where we even saw generals disobeying orders like pulling out of Syria. So the idea that Trump's going to come in and he's going to be this crazy dictator authoritarian isn't possible because he can't. Every institution under him, the State Department, the DOJ, all of them will be against him from day one because he's an idiot and he won't drain the swamp like he said that he was supposed to. But at least he's not going to advance the swamp like Joe Biden will.
Any response?
So I 100% believe because, like, you know, Rob said he's not going to be this crazy dictator. He actually has openly said, I'm going to be a dictator. And he says for one day, but we all know that that's not the case because anybody that has like that much power, they're not willing to give it up. Now, when people say, well, wait a second, why wasn't he a dictator his first 4 years? It's because he didn't know what the hell he was getting into. I've read multiple books about his administration. And in one of the books, he brought in some of the people he brought in. There was like maybe onesies or twosies of people that had some experience regarding government. Other than that, a lot of people, it was absolute chaos in the White House. And he had the highest turnover rate of any administration. Like he pretty much got rid of like 95% of his A team essentially, because here's one thing that Trump doesn't like. He doesn't like being told he's wrong. He doesn't like being told he's making a mistake. He fired and had a lot of people forced to resign, just forced them to resign because he doesn't like being told that he's wrong. He's already made it abundantly clear that he wants to stock his next administration with yes men. That's dangerous. He wants people to just basically tell him, yes, sir, that's a great policy right there, and not challenge him on it. You know, it's great to have in administration people that are going to work with you, but they have to be able to tell you, no, sir, that's not how you do things. You got to have checks and balances in place. Trump wants to get rid of all those checks and balances essentially to him. That's why he believes he has immunity for everything, because presidents have immunity. No, that's not how immunity works. But, you know, and one last final correction, though, is that, like, we are a constitutional republic, but we are still a representative democracy because we, the people, elect our representatives in Congress. That's what makes us a representative democracy. So we can be both a representative democracy and a constitutional republic, essentially.
Do you think it's healthy for a democracy for the opposition leadership to go on national television and say that the most powerful elected man in the world, the president of the United States, has to be fearful to criticize the intel agencies under him because, quote, they'll find 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at him? Do you think that's indicative of a healthy democracy?
I'm not sure what you're meaning. I mean, maybe I'm just like not understanding what your question is.
Chuck Schumer, but when Trump won the election, but before he was sworn in, went on Rachel Maddow's show and said that Trump was stupid to criticize the FBI because they would, quote, find 6 ways from Sunday getting back at him, which they did. They illegally spied on his administration and had been doing so for quite some time, to the point where Schumer said that, leaked to the press, had a 3 to 4 year investigation, and never stopped going after Donald Trump. Is that a sign of a healthy democracy?
So you're just wondering, like, is it healthy for an FBI investigation to investigate into Trump?
No, I'm asking you, when it is so corrupt that even Trump's head opposition leader, which Schumer would have been at the time, admitted that the leader of the United States cannot criticize, take Trump and Schumer's name out of it.
Sure.
Right? The president can't criticize the agencies underneath him because they will sabotage him. That's what Chuck Schumer was saying. Do you think that's a healthy democracy? Unelected bureaucrats in the intel agencies are beyond criticism because if they're criticized by even the president, they'll find a way to go after them.
The president can, criticize anybody. But the thing is, though, do you think it's also corrupt? I mean, do you think it's a little bit shifty that he would actually just start firing people like James Comey? Do you think that was healthy for him to do that?
Yeah, he should. Let me ask you this, right?
Mhm.
Do you think Comey should have been fired?
No, why?
Well, you are in the minority then, because Democrats were all calling for his firing.
Yeah, but I'm not like I don't have to agree with everything the Democrats say.
Okay,
Essentially.
that's fine. You'll acknowledge though, Democrat leadership wanted Comey fired, correct?
Yeah, they did because they didn't
Okay.
like the way that he handled the Hillary Clinton situation, which
Okay.
it's a fair criticism essentially.
And-
But my problem is though is that like Trump was known for like firing people, especially if they got too close. He was terrified of like people that were very critical of him and whatnot. And the way like for example, Alexander Vindman's a great example. Like after like they kind of like threw out the whole impeachment scandal, what happened afterwards? He just basically got like thrown out his ass.
Good.
So basically,
He should also be criminally investigated. It's
For
clear
what?
that he was operating as an agent of Ukraine. It's clear that he was working with Democrats with this shady whistleblower, Eric Charmella, whose name we couldn't even say. Remember that? Remember when whistleblowers were so sacrosanct that we couldn't even name their names? Now when we have whistleblowers out the wazoo coming out from the FBI under Joe Biden, all of a sudden we don't believe them. They're liars. They lose their job. They get fired. I noticed you haven't talked about that with Biden. All of these whistleblowers from the IRS and the FBI, Shapley, Ziegler, etc., that were demoted, fired, etc., because they didn't want to do like things like spy on fellow Americans at school board meetings. This is the interesting. Here's the question I have for you. You already said, should Trump have fired Comey? Yes, you should absolutely fire people that are intentionally sabotaging and lying to you. I don't have a problem with that, right? But you've already conceded that Democrats wanted him fired anyway, so whatever. The question I have for you is, what are the things that you are saying that are anti-democratic that Trump will do if he's elected? Let's go through them one by one.
well, for example, like I said, he's just going to hire, loyalists that are only going to answer to him. He believes
Okay.
that he is the answer to everything. Yes.
That's one.
Okay.
I just want to make. He said one by one, so I want to.
Okay. Gotcha.
I think that's a good idea. If I may rephrase this to maybe make it a little clearer, and you
Sure.
can correct me if I'm wrong, but your assertion here is that Trump will surround himself with yes men, fire anyone who disagrees, and simply set himself up as kind of like king of the castle here. Is that
Yes.
accurate?
Yeah, I mean, that's basically what every administration does. You don't keep people that are intentionally hostile to you. That's not what happens. So, for example, if you go back and you look at the first impeachment of Trump, you had all these people from the State Department that were repeatedly saying things like this. They were saying, Trump was going against our foreign policy. I'm sorry, you're an unelected bureaucrat. You don't have a foreign policy. Trump is the elected representative of the people. If Trump decides that our foreign policy is not going to be to continue to fund Ukraine, that's the legit way that it should be done. Not that a bunch of people in the State Department that weren't elected say, we don't like that, so we're going to sabotage this president. And all presidents do this. I'll turn the question to you. Do you think Merrick Garland's a yes man for Joe Biden?
No.
Why not?
What do you mean? Why not? Like, why is he? Is he?
Can you
not
give
like,
us Can you give us an example of where Merrick Garland has worked against Biden, or disagreed with Biden publicly, or overturned something that Biden said he wanted? Anything like that would be evidence that Rob here is wrong.
Well, he hasn't done. Well, okay. So, are we just talking about like any specific cases, essentially? Because,
Give us what you got. Yeah.
well, for example, like at any point, Biden could actually have him like have Merrick Garland reach out to drop the investigation into his son Hunter Biden. That has not happened, actually. As a matter of fact, the Department of Justice is actually investigating other Democrats. They're allowing his son to go through his investigations and whatnot. Biden at any time could say, hey, can you do me this favor and, just have all these charges dropped. He hasn't done any of that. Merrick Garland is continuing to do his job in the Department of Justice, and he's following suit with that. So I would say he's definitely not a yes man.
Well, that's not true. So one, it is technically true that Biden could snap his fingers. He could pardon them, right, if he wanted. The problem is it would look bad for him politically to do so right now.
Yeah.
And it would certainly look bad politically. And so when you're looking at the end goal of maintaining political power, yeah, although it's true that technically a president, which is funny because you're misrepresenting the idea that Trump has immunity, right? It is a constitutional argument as to whether or not you could criminally prosecute a president. It's not one that I'm in favor of, but it's not as ridiculous as people are saying, because the argument then becomes, well, then can we go back for the crime of, say, murder and charge Barack Obama for the extrajudicial killing of an American citizen overseas, which happened? Are we allowed to charge him? And there seems to be a scholarly argument like there has to be some sort of threshold that says like probably not a good idea to charge presidents 60 years in the past for stuff like that. Now, maybe that differentiates for like some crime you committed like cocaine usage or something like that that's outside the scope. But that's sort of the judicial argument that's being brought forth. That's sort of an aside. Anyways, the point is, no, it's not feasible to do what you're suggesting. Instead, what we see is Merrick Garland acting as the weaponization of the Biden administration, literally going after whistleblowers, parents at school board meetings, groups like Moms for Liberty, going after members of the press, going after pundits that are on the other side. And even when it comes to the Hunter Biden case, what we see is we have whistleblowers that repeatedly had to come out and say that the Hunter Biden investigation was intentionally sabotaged from the get-go. And then only when a judge spoke up about the sweetheart deal that Merrick Garland's DOJ tried to give Hunter Biden did they end up getting pie on their face, and they had to charge him with anything. And so they specifically chose to charge him with the one crime that couldn't be connected to Democrats or to Joe Biden, which was the crime of being high while having a gun, actually the one crime that I think shouldn't have been prosecuted, as opposed to the litany of obvious tax and FARA violations, because had he been charged with those, the question would have been, oh, Hunter Biden was illegally lobbying to who? And the answer, of course, is his father, which is why Merrick Garland's making sure those charges aren't brought.
Indulge me for a moment. Do you think Trump should pardon or promise to pardon Hunter Biden?
No. I think Trump should. I think
even though
Trump
you think
should,
that the charge brought against him was bullshit, and the one he was convicted for, at
I think that
was
most of the
bullshit,
charges, I think almost all the charges brought against Trump are bullshit, and it's just like cancel culture. We told the left over and over again, if you keep going down this road, things will get ugly. The left didn't care, and so now the only tool effective to fighting the left is to engage in cancel culture from the right. The same is true with lawfare. Until Democrats face the same consequences that they have weaponized against their opponents, it will not end.
Well, I really want to I want to challenge on that. You said that Merrick Garland went after parents at parent-teacher conferences. I actually looked into that. Ted Cruz made this false assertion that that's exactly what happened. That wasn't the case. The reason why they did an investigation into parents at parent-teacher conferences is because there were school administrators, there were superintendents, there were teachers that were being threatened and beaten. You're obviously going to have to investigate a situation like this. Now, they spoke to all the school districts and all the attorneys general and whatnot, and they basically went through the process and say, hey, listen, we're not going to target people about this. Now, they kind of expanded upon that memorandum, essentially saying, listen, we're not calling people terrorists, essentially. We just want to make sure that parents aren't calling, because this is a common occurrence. There are parents that are threatening school board members. There are parents that are threatening to bomb libraries and stuff like that, all because of books, essentially. That's a dangerous situation, and you have to take those situations seriously. Wouldn't you agree to that?
No, I don't agree. I think you're misrepresenting.
Why not?
I'll tell you. I think you're misrepresenting the situation. So let's start at a baseline. One, would you agree there are things that we could consider crimes or inappropriate behavior that don't rise to the level of the FBI getting involved?
Threats, I definitely, especially terrorist, not terrorist like this, but dangerous threats that could involve
Can you give
harm.
us an example of one real quick, just so we know what we're talking about?
Me?
No, Rob, you said, do you think that there are threats that could...
For example,
can you give us an example of when you think you shouldn't rise to the level?
Sure. There's a brawl at a football game outside of high school. Should the FBI get involved?
No.
Okay, right. So what was the rationale when Merrick Garland was in front of Congress and he signed off on that memorandum? What was the evidence he gave? Because you're saying a bunch of stuff here. I want you to give me the evidence that Merrick Garland gave in front of Congress why he signed that memorandum. Go ahead.
Yeah, I got to pull it up real quick. So from what I understand,
he said two things.
Mm-hmm.
I could tell you if you want me to.
Okay.
And you could say if you disagree. He said, one, the letter that was sent from the National School Board Association, right? Mm-hmm. And that's the one that said, use the Patriot Act, the one I'm talking about, right? That said these were domestic terrorists, these parents. Correct? Yeah. That's one. That's what the letter said from the National School Board Association, to use the tools of the Patriot Act, correct?
Garland's member never labeled parents speak at school as domestic terrorists. That I'm looking at it right now.
That's not what my question was. My question was, when Garland was asked, why did you put this memorandum out in front of Congress? He testified in front of Congress. You acknowledge that, right? He was asked, what was your reasoning for this? He gave two answers. The one was this letter that came from one of the National School Board Associations, correct?
Yeah,
and that letter said that they should use the Patriot Act to treat them like domestic terrorists, correct?
But they weren't treated as domestic terrorists, though.
I understand, but what you're doing is you're saying, but Garland said don't treat them as terrorists. I'm saying that was one of the rationales. This letter said treat them like terrorists. That was one of the rationales, correct? That letter.
From the National School Board, to be
Okay,
clear, right?
You don't have to answer. That's fine if you can't answer. The other rationale that Merrick Garland gave in sworn testimony in front of Congress was, and I'm quoting, news reports that I heard. When he was asked what specific reports, he couldn't give a specific report. That means the only indicative evidence that we have is this letter from the National School Board Association. Now, you're right that this letter did cite examples of violence and crimes. Here, I looked into this too. Okay, here's some of the examples they used, right? They said that there was a school board meeting where people were yelling Nazi slogans. Whoa, sounds bad, right? A bunch of Nazis.
I think Moms for Liberty was doing the Nazi slogans. I don't know about the PTAs though.
Well, the reason they cited a specific school that this happened on, the Nazi slogans was not people endorsing Nazis, but calling the school board that had locked down the school and forced kids into masks Nazis. They said, you're being a bunch of Nazis. So that was one. Then it cited a couple other examples like that, people that were just yelling mean things, not threats, just mean things. And then it cited 2 acts of violence. There were 2 crimes. One was a school board member left and someone chased them down and punched them. Hands down, assault, no question here. I don't think one assault's reason for the FBI to get involved. Would you agree?
Sure, that's fair.
Okay. The other example it gave was the story, and I'm going to forget this, I believe it was Loudoun County, Virginia, where a man was arrested for disorderly conduct and some other things. Want to know why he was arrested? You see, his daughter was raped by a trans student in a bathroom. And then he went to the school board meeting where other parents were furious about the incident, and the principal lied and said there was no sexual assault. And this dad was furious and started cursing and swearing and screaming and was escorted out and arrested for doing that, which the charges were later dropped. That, to my knowledge, is the 2 examples of criminal activity that Merrick Garland used as the basis for this memorandum. I'm happy for you to show me any other examples that Merrick Garland cited. I'll give you the floor right now. Give me any examples of violence or criminal activity that Merrick Garland cited, other than you generally saying, well, parents were getting mean. They were saying mean shit. Can you give me any specific examples?
As he looks for them? Oh, go ahead. If you have them all.
No, go ahead. Go ahead. Keep going. No, you're good.
Okay. So just for my audience's clarity thing. So is your accusation here, Rob, that Merrick Garland used the force of the government in order to prosecute these people? Is this what we're claiming?
Investigate. In fact, several of the FBI, at least one of the FBI whistleblowers said the reason he decided to blow the whistle was because, contrary to what we haven't even got to how it was actually implemented, was that he was basically told to sit outside school board meetings and spy on these parents.
Sure. How many people were arrested by the FBI, by Merrick Garland?
Not sure if anywhere. There were some that were investigated. For example, Moms for Liberty was investigated using the same tools that we investigate other domestic terror organizations. But it's sort of irrelevant to the question of weaponizing the FBI to spy on groups that you consider your political opponent. For example, let me ask you, Wick or Alex, right? Had Donald Trump had Bill Barr come out and say, we think that anti-immigration, or we think that anti-ICE groups are a danger. They attack several ICE facilities. And so now we're going to have the FBI work with local law enforcement to monitor any time that there is a protest of people protesting our immigration status. Do you think that's something that Democrats would have accepted? They would have said, oh, fair enough. There were attacks at ICE facilities. Do you think they would, or would they have said, this is Trump destroying democracy. He's weaponizing the FBI and the DOJ to go after people that are his political opponents? Because that's how we got in this conversation. We're talking about attacks on democracy, correct?
Sure. Let's let Alex answer. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I missed what because I had to look up this.
Okay, I'll rephrase. I'll say it again.
I'm sorry.
He's asking you if right something similar had happened with ICE facilities and things like that. You know what? Instead of me steel manning it, Rob repeats.
Yeah,
so
I get it. I'll do it 10 seconds.
Yeah.
There were a bunch of groups that hated immigration, right? ICE. They attacked ICE facilities. Imagine that Trump had Bill Barr come out and say, we're going to, anytime there's an immigration protest, we're going to have the FBI cooperate with local law enforcement to look into them. How do you think Democrats would have responded to that?
So just make sure I have this clear, okay? I just want to make sure I have this 100% clear. Are you talking about like physical attacks upon like ICE facilities and whatnot?
Yes, that you'll acknowledge that happened, correct?
If attacks happen on ICE facilities, that's different because that's a government institution essentially.
But okay, but you acknowledge that did happen.
Oh no, I think he got.
Sorry.
I think he got.
Well, for those listening, it did happen. There's actually footage of them pulling down the.
Yeah. Okay. Am I good?
Yeah.
Okay, you're good. You're good. Go
Where
ahead.
did you lose me at?
You
We're
just
still waiting
asked
for
me-
your.
Okay. I just want to make sure. That it was clear that if facilities were in fact attacked by people, right, and sending out like law enforcement to investigate people that assault ICE facilities, right?
That's not the question. The question is they use that as a precursor to say we're going to put out a memorandum that says the FBI is going to be cooperating with law enforcement to monitor all protest against ICE, even those that didn't result in violence. Going forward, because there was violence at this one, now we're going to monitor all of these people. You think that would have been acceptable?
If I'm going to remain consistent, yes, I would actually.
Would you think
honestly.
Democrats would have said that was an attack on democracy?
Probably not.
Yes, they would have. They certainly would have. And they would have been right to complain.
So.
Okay, you have those examples?
The only thing that I can see is like they 5 days after receiving the NSBA letter, Garland issued a memo citing a disturbing spike in harassment, intimidation, threats of violence against school administrators, board members, teachers, and staff who participate in the vital work of running our nation's public schools. So as far as like any like actual cases, that's about all there is.
Yeah, he
to
didn't
it,
have it. So I watched the entire hearing and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked that Garland he didn't even have a clue. He was like, yeah, some news reports. And they're like, can you give us an example? Like, what was the news report that you heard? I mean, you're literally talking about using the FBI to monitor people at school board meetings. So surely the rationale from this has to be beyond reproach. We had very specific evidence that XYZ was going to occur. But instead, he's just like, well, and they actually came back, if I'm not mistaken, that National School Board Association rescinded the letter because they're like, our bad, this letter was overly hostile language, blah, blah, blah. And so if you take the letter portion out of it, and even the National School Board Association is like, we no longer want to stand by that letter. What was the rationale? And again, then we have whistleblowers from the FBI saying, we're treating these people with the same watch list that we're treating domestic terrorists. I was literally, the one guy that spoke at the committee said he was like, when he decided to become a whistleblower, he's literally sitting in a parking lot of a school board meeting, spying on parents over the flimsiest of rationales. And the reason was because these people were seen. It's the same reason that there were so many attacks all over the place, particularly on people that were upset about COVID policy, right?
Now finish
ahead,
your
Wick.
point. But now I have a question.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Sure. So I'm just trying to get at the actual complaint here. Would you let me give you a hypothetical, okay? So there are reports. You get a bunch of reports from randos, just civilians, right? Saying, hey, there's this pro-Palestine protest that's going around, and we've heard some shit, right? We think they may be planning something. This is kind of scary. What do you think that the FBI or the police or whatever should do in that situation? Should they just not look into it because it's not because it's so wishy-washy?
If there's specific evidence that suggests a specific incident occurring, of course I don't have a problem with the FBI looking into it. What I would have a problem would be, and I say this as someone who doesn't really have a love for the pro-Palestinian protesters. My take on Israel-Palestine's
right?
It's a little,
Yeah.
I don't think we should be involved at all. I dislike both sides, to put it bluntly, right? But I have no skin in the game for the pro-Palestinian protesters. I would have found it to be outrageous if the Biden administration, if Garland put out a memo that said, well, we heard that there was going to potentially be some sort of bad incident, so the FBI will be monitoring every pro-Palestinian protest. I would say that's outrageous. Just like I said, and I'm consistent on it, I found the treatment of Muslims after 9/11 to be outrageous. There were mosques that our government was spying on, that there was no evidence whatsoever to suggest that these... Now, if you have specific evidence that this specific mosque is involved, that's a different question. But to just generally say, well, we're labeling this entire group of people, and it's these sorts of erosion of rights, if you don't stick up for the people you disagree with, right, that it snowballs. That's how we ended up with the Patriot Act. And so when I hear all of these attacks on democracy, like I see the attacks on democracy. I see the FBI. This is just one incident. We could talk about whistleblowers. The Biden administration and the Obama administration collectively have gone after more whistleblowers than every other administration combined. No one
let
said
me
shit
ask
when
you-
Obama did it.
Let me ask you, Alex.
Yes.
Because
ahead.
I have a question for you on this
Sure.
as well, right? So let's just, for the sake of argument, say that Rob is completely correct here, that there was no basis. What should Merrick Garland, or if Merrick Garland didn't put a stop to it? So it's not just that he didn't go along with it, but he didn't stop it from happening. Do you think that that's at least a black mark on his record? If he knew about these incidents that were going on, where the FBI was, and again, we're just ceding to the argument for the sake of the hypothetical.
Sure.
Rob's entirely correct here that they were violating people's rights by going and extrajudiciously spying on these people, and then Merrick Garland knew about it. Do you not think it's a black mark, at least on his record, that he didn't put the stop to it?
Yeah, I would say so. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, I'll be honest.
Can I talk about something maybe it's more contemporary that maybe you know more about, right? If Merrick Garland's not just a yes man for Biden, why won't he release the tapes of Robert Hur?
He actually explained that in great detail. I'm actually glad you brought that up. It's because everything else that's within the tape is basically like a bunch of filler words, like the and the and the like the blank stuff. So basically, and he's already actually testified under Congress that special counsel Hur essentially said that this is a complete transaction. What's the word? Transcript. Okay. The transcript in here is complete. There's nothing else missing. Bless you. There's nothing else missing in here. Everything in here is 100%. The only thing that's missing in here is we didn't include the uhs and the ums and all the filler words because they're essentially not important. Essentially, that's the reason why they're not essentially releasing them. There's really no point to it, and he was very, very clear about that.
If that's true, then why not just release them? If it's literally the same thing, you know the reason as well as I do. What would be your hunch why they're not releasing it? If you had to guess.
Because Biden stutters, because he does a lot of filler words and stuff like that. I mean,
because it's going to prove Robert Hur's points, where basically Hur let him get away with mishandling classified information and reading it and showing it to his ghostwriter. And the reason he let him go for that was because a jury would be sympathetic because he's basically just a sad old man that doesn't know where he's at. And the Biden administration said, no, how dare you? And so it's like, okay, well, let's hear the tapes as opposed, if we're admitting that the transcript's not the full measure, that there were filler words and stuff like that, then we want to hear the tape. What we're told by the Biden administration is, believe it or not, Joe Biden's the smartest, sharpest person in the world behind the scenes. When you see him, he looks like a vegetable. But trust us, behind the scenes. Okay, then let's see behind the scenes. If the best argument you could have for why Merrick Garland's violating a subpoena as we speak, the best argument you have is because the information released would be the exact same as what's already been released. That doesn't seem to be a reason to violate a lawful congressional subpoena.
Don't you think they're kind of reaching though? Like if they find, okay. I mean, we can disagree about that because like if they actually end up listening to the entire like tape and it's found that it's sufficient, they basically wasted all that time for nothing, wouldn't you say?
No, I think that if it shows. If this tape, which the American people have a right to hear, and certainly Congress has a right to hear it, shows that Biden has a dementia problem going into this election, we all have the right to know that. I think that's absolutely true. I don't think the argument of just trust us, we made some slight alterations, but trust us. What if one of those alterations were, for example, him like under his breath saying something like, yeah, I did know that was classified. And they altered it. How would we know? Why won't we just see the source material and then we could decide for ourselves? Instead, we have to rely upon a transcript, which we've been told has been edited.
Well, the only thing they edited out of there was just like, once again, the filler words.
How do you know?
And this is, because so you don't trust special investigator Robert Hur? You don't trust his judgment?
I don't trust his judgment. He let Biden off the hook. I don't trust his judgment at all. He gave the exact rationale for why Biden committed a crime and then decided not to prosecute him because he's a feeble old man. That's ridiculous. You want to talk about immunity? Any crime that requires intent, now Joe Biden has immunity from. Because he'll just say, did you ever see that Seinfeld episode, right, where they're stealing books, Uncle Leo? I'm an old man. I'm confused. That's the Joe
I don't remember that one.
You're missing out. We're being told that we have to vote for this guy, right, for president of the United States. But he's too confused to be held accountable for decades mishandling classified information.
My question is, why hasn't Biden given himself immunity from this then?
Because it would look bad politically.
So what? So he can't give himself immunity or something like that? I mean, is that what you're wondering?
No. How bad would it look politically if Robert Hur would? Right.
Yeah. Hold on. Alex.
Yes.
Okay. Please. You understand, hopefully, how there are political considerations to be
Sure.
had here, and you can cede to at least one possible reason that Biden would not pardon his son or give
Yeah.
himself immunity or any of that would be because it would, quote unquote, give away the game. Now,
Sure.
to be clear to my audience, this isn't something I believe, but it needs to be addressed, right? So, do you at least acknowledge that that's possible?
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
to address Rob's point, right, please, why do you think, if not that, why would they refuse to release the record from the Her report, right? The unedited document. Because there's too many ums and ahs?
Yeah, because there's a lot of filler words in there, and Robert Hur even said that there's nothing else. This is a complete transcript, essentially.
Do you think it's a good idea that they're not releasing the transcript from a political standpoint?
I honestly don't. I think they should release it. I don't care, honestly.
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you agree?
Sure.
Look, and this is a tough proposition, right?
Okay.
Because polling, we all know polling can be wildly inaccurate or biased, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But do you, in general, agree with polling that suggests a huge percentage of people in this country are distrusting of Congress, of the president, whether it be Biden or Trump, of the intel agents? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, sure.
You don't think then that us being told, trust us, this dude's violating a subpoena right now. Merrick Garland's violating a subpoena. A crime for which he says is so serious that Steve Bannon's going to prison, right? Like right now, Steve Bannon's going for the same crime, violating a subpoena. But Merrick Garland's voluntarily violating a subpoena because he wants to keep the word and from the American people being heard. But trust us, that's the only reason. That's all it is. You don't think that that's bad for an American people that are already so distrusting that it's like
It could be.
it doesn't. I mean, does it make sense to you? Do you think Merrick Garland should be prosecuted and go to prison for violating the subpoena?
In a fair system, yeah. This is the United States of America. We have the right to prosecute anybody. But here's what I'd like to go for you, okay? I want to just kind of toss this
I
back
want to
at
get
you,
back
okay?
to that in 1 second, but go ahead. That's fair.
Yeah. So if we're not allowed to trust everything, like if we're saying, okay, we can't trust the system, we can't trust everything else, why should we trust anything about like what Trump says he has immunity, therefore he should be cleared of all crimes? Why should we trust anything that Trump says when he's pretty much been wrong about every single thing? Why is it people have so much faith in Trump when he has consistently lied and he's even stolen classified documents he was not allowed to have? Why is it that we cannot trust the system, but we can trust Donald Trump? Why is that?
Well, who says that? Who are you debating? You're not talking to someone who's some Trump sycophant. So let me answer to what you say.
Let him answer, please.
To what you say specifically there. Trump's opinions on a legal theory, you don't have to trust that. That's going to go to the Supreme Court and they'll make a decision, right? And you may agree or disagree, but I'm not taking Trump. This is what I think of Trump's legal theories.
Sure.
Nothing. They mean next to nothing. Now, his lawyers that may be making these arguments, perhaps they have more credence with me, but Trump's just argument, I'm president, I can do whatever I want. I don't care about that. The idea of why should I trust Trump with anything, I don't. In fact, that's why I want a government that is filled with transparency. I don't trust anyone. I don't even trust myself 10 days from now I don't trust myself tonight to make the right decisions. Like, I want a government of transparency where the American people knows. Now, I understand it can't be every little government secret. I get that. But
Sure.
the idea that I want an open and honest government, my issue is that I see the government is not open and honest, and it has grown to such mammoth proportions that the American people's voice no longer matters, and it's currently engaged in a double standard against anyone that they see as potential outsiders, which is why they didn't like Bernie Sanders in 2016, which is why they didn't like Trump. Not because Trump's some saint that I trust everything he says. I think Trump's done a lot of things that are terrible. I criticize Trump in ways probably more effective than many, many, many of the left-wingers. I personally wanted Vivek Ramaswamy or Ron DeSantis more than I wanted Donald Trump. That's who I wanted. So I don't just take, whatever Trump says is good. I don't believe that. But I want to go back now. We can come back to this if you want, but just real quick to put a bow on this, right? If you say in a fair system Garland should go to jail, you do realize he's not going to go to jail. So doesn't this disprove your whole argument that he's not just a yes man for Biden? Because he's definitely not going to send himself to jail for violating that subpoena. So you would acknowledge that means it's not a fair system.
Not a fair system. That's basically your question, right?
Correct. If you said in a fair system, Garland would go to jail. He ain't going to go to jail. Garland's not going to send himself to jail. And so would you acknowledge that means he's not going?
Not yet.
Not yet. Hold on. Let's back up a moment, please.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by not yet?
Well, here's the thing. Like, he's not going to send himself to jail. Like, any rational person knows this, right? But, however, Congress can hold him in contempt of Congress, essentially, correct?
Correct.
And they can also, like, subpoena him, and which Steve Bannon, but, Stephen Bannon is
You
also
think
not in
that
position.
should happen? That's the question.
Oh, do I think it should happen? Do I think Merrick Garland should be sent to prison if it's proven, that he's a violent subpoena? Sure.
He was voted. They voted for contempt today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's it. So he should go to jail, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean,
if he doesn't, that shows there's a double standard, correct?
Sure. I can agree with that.
Okay, that's my whole argument when it comes to corruption. Okay. We keep talking about this, or we can move on to domestic policy.
We can move on. Let's move on to domestic policy.
I'll take that win. You just conceded that there's an incredible double standard in corruption.
It's like that for pretty much every system. But let's move on to because I don't want to get in the weeds of that. So anyway,
I'm sure you don't. That's fine. It's fine.
What do you feel about like for example, like the bipartisan infrastructure bill? How do you feel about that with Biden? Do you think that's a good program, or do you think it's kind of a crappy program?
I think that I feel the same way I do anytime there was a bill like this under Trump or under Obama or under Bush. We're told these amazing things will happen when we spend billions upon billions of dollars, and trust us, it'll go to important things. And then all it ever seems to do is go 10% to where it should, and the rest of it goes into the pockets of wealthy people, which usually results in a transformation of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class, and inflation occurring. That's what happened I'll criticize Trump right now. It's what happened under the CARES Act with Trump, all of the massive stimuluses we had with Trump. Now, Democrats, as I said, my criticism of Trump is Democrats wanted that more. They wanted even more spending, which would have led to an even bigger transfer of wealth. So, yeah, in theory, is it a good idea to spend money on infrastructure? Sure. Is that something the government should be doing anyways? Yeah. I refuse to believe that the CHIPS Act, the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that spent trillions of dollars, which we're now seeing in our pocketbooks when we go buy groceries, was a good thing because, trust us, it promises us that it's going to build roads and stuff. The better question to ask is, how is the economy in such a shitty shape when Biden just printed trillions upon trillions of dollars? If you gave me $5 trillion and said, okay, Rob, can you make people's pocketbooks look better temporarily? I'd be like, hell yeah. Easy, no problem. And yet somehow Biden spent all of this money, and this is what we see? We see, and we could talk about the numbers if you want, right? But the American people aren't lying when they say we're feeling the crunch, and they are. And if we believe the inflation numbers from the government, they're really bad. And if we actually look at what it really is, it's way worse. So the American people aren't buying. I've said this, Biden's team, Wick, you got to get Progressive Victory to call me, man. I'd set the message for them. Biden's team makes a mistake the entire time when they're like, oh, the economy is great. That's such a bad argument because you can't lie to people about that. The people know that the economy is not great. And so what you're doing is if you're looking to the Democrats and Biden for help, you're saying, I'm struggling. And instead what you're hearing is everyone's doing great. The message you're getting is there's no help coming then, right? And so that's the real question to me. Given the amount of money we've spent, why is this the terrible results we're seeing? What we got for our troubles was inflation and a bunch of temporary jobs that almost all went to foreign-born people.
Yeah, I missed that because I kind of, but I think I caught the gist of it. You're asking me is like, what was like the end goal? Why, if everything is so...
Why is the economy shit? And Rob, this is Rob's...
Why is the economy...
With all the money we spent, why is the economy shit? There we go. Wick, very concise.
Yes.
Should just let Wick make the
argument. Yeah. For starters, okay, like, people would say, like, we are in, like, hard times, essentially. Okay, sure. But here's the thing, though. There's kind of like a cause and effect kind of deal, okay? Ever since, like, the war, like, in Russia ever kicked off and, like, there's been other conflicts have kicked off, the price of oil's increased. It's kind of a logistics, you know?
Hold on. Can I just ask you, Alex, for clarification? Are you ceding to the point that the economy is shit?
I wouldn't say shit. It's just, it could be better. I wouldn't say shit.
You're conceding to the point that it's bad just for... Okay, go ahead.
I would say it's about average. We're doing better than most of the other first world countries. Let's just put it that way. I'd say, like, we could definitely do better, but we can always do better regarding the economy. But the thing is like, we have to take things into account. When it comes down to, like, logistics, everything that gets made, for example, with high gas prices, like with diesel and whatnot, like the high price of diesel, anytime like a company has to ship like one product, let's say bread from one location to the next, right? Any company that moves it is going to charge a certain amount, and that certain amount is actually going to increase the price, and then that store is essentially going to increase the price of that the loaf of bread and whatnot. That's going to happen essentially, especially when gas prices are, I wouldn't say they're high right now. They're about in the middle right now. We're actually, I wouldn't say in a terrible spot. Now, people are probably going to bring up the fact that, oh, well, gas was like, $1.90, $1.86 in 2020. There was a reason for that, though. It's because at the time, the demand was low, but the supply was high at the same time. Now, why is it that everything is just like, why is the economy just like not stupendous? Because things like this do in fact take time. The amount of jobs that have been created, like with the CHIPS Act, with facilities being built, semiconductor plants that are being built, that's going to create more jobs, to create more demand in this community, because either we control the market of semiconductors or our competition does, essentially. That's the good thing about the CHIPS Act and the bipartisan infrastructure bill, because if roads aren't fixed, then people aren't going to be able to get jobs. People aren't going to be able to get to their jobs. It's really simple. It all kind of ties together. I'm sorry if that was like a long rant, but that's just kind of like.
I'm notorious for long rants. You're not going to hear me complain about it. So a couple things to say. First off,
Sure.
I think it's disingenuous to say that it's all attached to the price of oil and gas. I don't know if that's what your intent is there, but that's certainly not true. Second, even if we accept that, those prices were up under Biden Russia invading Ukraine. Third, the fact that Biden came in and set sort of the precedent that, set the signal out to the oil producing companies that he was going to end the fossil fuel industry. Even though it is true that domestic production is up under Biden, if they would have continued the same policies, there's an estimation that Trump's policies continued into the Biden administration would have produced an additional 2.2 billion barrels of oil. So actually, even under that metric, Biden did slow it down. And there's no evidence that sort of Russia exclusively doing this was to blame. We've also seen that, remember, Democrats were furious and didn't want Trump to, when oil was really cheap, replenish our national reserves. Biden's using it as an election ploy to diminish our national reserves. Biden probably well knows that it was either the United States, our allies in the UK, or Ukraine, or probably a combination of the three, that blew up the pipeline that was blown up over there in Europe, which made oil prices, energy prices, not oil specifically, but energy prices across the globe go even higher. And all of this inflation was occurring well before Russia invaded. The truth is, why is it that you remember when Biden came in office and he was like, yeah, I won't make excuses. The buck stops with me. But everything's everyone's fault but his. Why can't we blame Biden for Russia invading? Why not? They didn't invade when Trump was there. So if the excuse is going to be, well, he can't help it, Russia invaded, what did he do to prevent it? What was the policies that he was taking? And then secondly, I'll just say real quick, and also, I just think you're totally off bounds on this. What you're talking about is maybe responsible for like 5% of inflation. The vast majority of inflation, let's just call it out, is money printing. It's the fact it's money printing and lockdowns. Both policies that you could criticize Trump for, and I do heavily, but certainly Biden and the Democrats did even worse. When you shut down the world's largest economy and then you double the money supply or increase it by 50% or whatever, who would be shocked that all of a sudden the value of money is less? And the people that inflation always hurts the most is poorest people and working class people.
So the reason why, Russia didn't invade Ukraine, probably because they weren't ready at the time. That's the thing. And they also probably figured, oh, well, Biden's in office. We'll just, Biden's obviously, they didn't do anything with they thought they were just going to invade and they were just going to take over Ukraine in like 3 days, which turned out to be false. We actually were helping out Ukraine. Actually, we were training and building up their forces. So we got to, that's something that's been happening between Obama, because we learned what happened in Crimea, and then it continued with Trump and it continued under Biden as well. Now, to answer the question, printing money, yes, but there's nothing that we're not taking into account. The tax cuts in 2017 actually increased the deficit, increased the national debt. We basically bailed out people that are like wealthy corporations, essentially, and basically we got saddled with that debt as well. And I'm sure you're going to be critical of that as well. But it's all kind of combined in together, essentially, because tax cuts don't actually benefit the American people. It actually benefits the top 1%, which I'm sure you would probably agree with.
It's not true. The tax cuts actually did benefit poor and working class people as well. Now, the argument, it is true, but would you deny that? You're just saying it.
I would. why am I paying more taxes than under those tax cuts?
I don't think you were. Well, maybe you specifically were, but I don't know what your income bracket is, but most people were paying less under the tax cuts at all income brackets, those that paid in. I'll look for the data here in a second. I don't have it in front of me. But it's even if I would accept that, which I don't, because I think that tax cuts did benefit the poor and working class as well. There's criticism to be made of the average Republican idea of, this is the stupidity of the Republican and Democrat debate, where the Republicans are like, we'll cut your taxes, but they're not going to cut spending. Okay, well, that doesn't add up. And Democrats are like, we're going to increase programs and spending, but we won't raise your taxes. Neither of those add up. You're right. If you're going to have tax cuts, then you should cut programs. That's exactly what this country should be doing. The federal government is bloated beyond the point of being like, it's insane, right? And so we should have tax cuts, but we should also responsibly, severely cut back the amount of programs and spending that we have with our government. And you're not going to hear from me that Trump didn't spend like a madman. It's one of the things I criticize Tea Party people for. If you were against Obama spending, it is undoubtable over his 4 years, Trump spent at a higher clip than Obama. However, if we look at just that spending, because at the end of the day, your argument with tax cuts is going to be moot anyways, because the largest transfer of wealth that we've seen in recent history of this country came as a result of COVID lockdowns and stimulus spending. That's what happened. And that came under the end of Trump and then throughout the Biden administration. That's undoubtable. That's what happened, right? So the problem, theoretically, let me steelman your position. Your argument with tax cuts would be it would lead from a transfer of wealth from the poor and working class to the upper class. That's your argument?
Essentially, yeah.
But we see that that's worse now. And the reason that it's worse came about because of the socialist policies of big government intervention into our government telling us to lock down, and then big government intervention in the form of printing money and sending out all this money. When the government prints this money, the people that are advantaged the most are the people that get access to the money first. And those are going to be people that are directly in cahoots with the banks, etc. The people that suffer the worst through inflation are going to be the poor and working class. And that's exactly what we see. And I could read you the numbers if you want. Now, I'll admit, I've been sick all week. I know the core CPI numbers and the job numbers just came out this week. So I had this debate with economist Noah Smith last month on Wick's channel. So I have the numbers from last month, from April, right? So we could go through those. They're not the most recent, but you can see, looking at this number, just how bleak the picture is if we accept the numbers that come from the United States government, which there's solid reason not to believe those numbers. In many cases, many of the consumer goods that are necessary have increased 50 to 80%. It's not workable. The American people are struggling mightily, and it's not because of the tax cuts. But the difference is, I'm throwing you a bone and saying this. I'm not saying Republicans and Trump aren't responsible for this as well. They are. They signed off at the end of the day. They did. It's just that the Democrats have been worse. And I don't find it persuasive, the argument to trust us, this economy is great. Like one of the things you said in your opening statement, which is sort of ironic because I think you have this exactly backwards. You said Trump inherited a good economy and Biden inherited a bad economy. But that's an argument for why Biden's doing even worse. If you inherit an economy that bottomed out, then surely it's easy for you to say, look, we're making market improvements. And Biden tries that. He says, look how many jobs we're creating. Right. You and your party went along with Republicans in shutting down and killing thousands upon thousands upon thousands of jobs. And then when you let people go back to work, you say, look at the job we just created. No, you destroyed people's lives and then told them they could go back to work.
Okay, two things. I want to let Alex respond to that. Then I have a question for both of you.
Sure.
And then we are kind of wrapping up a little bit here.
Sure.
And
Not a
so we're
problem.
going to go to closings and all that. But I want to give you a chance to respond before I ask you both a question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So first things first. Okay. Like with the whole COVID lockdowns, people could say, "Oh, the COVID lockdowns were absolutely horrible. They never should happen." The truth is that we were dealing with a pandemic that nobody knew how to handle. Why? Because the task force got gutted, essentially. A task force that was actually supposed to predict and basically like have a plan. There was like an absolute playbook to fix pandemics like this. And when people say, "Oh my God, we never should have done these lockdowns," are probably some of the reasons why people are still alive, honestly. I mean, you can disagree with it all you want to, but when I looked at the numbers, I mean, like in some cases, there were people that were actually saved. Australia had the same kind of turnabout. There were some countries that actually had these lockdowns. It probably saved people's lives more than likely. And we have to look at this from a very pragmatic point of view, essentially. Yes, they printed a lot of money. There was a lot of people that took advantage of PPP loans, like wealthy people, especially. they shouldn't have qualified for them. That should have been left specifically for like small business owners, people that actually lost much. Now, there was a plan for COVID when it hit us. That falls squarely on the federal government, of course. But who was the commander in chief at the time? It was Donald Trump. He said, I'm going to leave it to the states. That is such a cop-out of an answer. You're supposed to set the example as the commander in chief to do your part. Now, why did so many people die, more people die under Biden? It's because people stopped listening to the experts. They listened to bloggers. They listened to Alex Jones. They listened to all these people that were not experts in this field. They listened to people talk about, oh, I'm just going to inject I'm going to inject, disinfectant and stuff like that, because they did not listen. They were listening to like people that had no idea what to do about this. Now, when they had to, like a lot of the jobs that came back, I think like finally all the jobs that were lost came back in 2022. We've had an increase in jobs, exponentially, essentially. Now we can say, oh, these are just part-time jobs. Somebody still has to take those jobs. We can nag on like, oh, part-time jobs, they are real jobs. Somebody has to fill those positions. We can say, oh, well, that you pretty much killed the American dream. We didn't kill the American dream. It's just it got put at a halt. The pandemic was a once in a century pandemic, essentially. But that's my whole argument there.
Okay.
Any response, Rob?
Yeah, real quick. The labor force still, it's not true that we've been creating jobs beyond the level. I mean, that is true in a sense, but it's not the number we should be looking at. We should be looking at the labor participation rate, right? Because as the country's population grows, there's always a natural growth in job growth. So the question is there a higher percentage of people participating in the labor force than now? We'll read this real quick. As of July 2023, the labor force participation rate was 62.6, which is almost a percentage point below its pre-pandemic level in February 2020. This indicates there are still fewer people participating in the labor force before COVID. I don't have the study in front of me, but Johns Hopkins did a comprehensive look at different countries and their reactions to COVID, and they found that lockdowns had almost no effect on saving lives. In fact, quite to the contrary, we see countries that didn't lock down, that we were told were going to be devastated, like Sweden, actually are doing better than their contemporary countries when it came to excess deaths during the pandemic and now after the pandemic. We could also see that same comparison states, where we could see states that we were told, like Florida, which had every reason to suspect would be a state that would be near the top of COVID death rates because it has an elderly population, which is basically the biggest comorbidity you could have. It actually fell right in the middle. I think it's like one state below New York when it came to COVID deaths. And that's even if we trust the numbers, which is a difficult proposition in its own right. No, lockdowns didn't save lives. They were a disaster. The idea that we shouldn't have known is ridiculous. The problem was that we did trust the experts, not that we needed more experts. The experts weren't thinking about what lockdowns would do in other fields. If I'm a pandemic expert and you say, hey, what should we do about a pandemic? I may come to the conclusion, tell everyone not to leave their house for the next 40 days. However, if you're someone who's looking at the bigger picture, you would say that will devastate and harm more people in the long run because it'll kill the global economy, which is what people like me were saying. And I was right. I was absolutely vindicated, just like I wasn't so much about COVID. And there is no evidence. I will allow you to point to the evidence. I'll just ask you bluntly, if it's true, and we were told that Florida was one of the worst lockdown states, why is it that their death rates weren't any worse really than a state like New York that had the biggest lockdowns?
So you're wondering why Florida didn't have the large. So you're trusting Florida's numbers, but not New York's numbers. Essentially, I'm
trusting both numbers for the sake of this argument.
For the sake of this argument, You're trusting both numbers.
Correct.
Why did Florida have because from what I understand, most of the red states actually had some of the worst rates, if I'm not mistaken.
But they didn't when it came to Florida was the state that we were told, right, that when it came to lockdowns, did it the worst. Remember there was that ad, what was it? The Purge, the Forever Purge. The Democrats put out this ad, and it was like on an airplane, you have the right not to wear a mask and die of COVID, right? And there was this big fear-mongering. They said bodies were going to be piling up on the streets in Florida. It didn't really happen that way. Now, Florida wasn't the best state when it came to deaths, but again, when you factor in the comorbidities, the average age of people in Florida, higher than other areas of the country, so you'd expect that there would be more percentage of COVID deaths. I think they end up being like 22, 23, and New York was like 21, 22. Very comparable. Go ahead.
No, what I'm saying is like they don't actually have the numbers as far as Florida is concerned, but it actually says right here in the National Library of Medicine, red states had higher COVID infection rates and deaths in 2021 compared to blue states. Red states implemented fewer political decisions to mitigate COVID-19 than blue states. Biological factors such as age and obesity predicted deaths only in red states, and vaccination rates predicted fewer deaths in blue states.
Okay, just so we're not all just citing shit, I pulled up the numbers from the where is this? The National Center for Health Statistics, and it rates by state. Here are the top 5 states. There's Kentucky, Oklahoma, West Virginia, Mississippi, Tennessee, New Mexico, Ohio. Well, top 10 for you guys. New Mexico, Ohio, Nevada, Kansas, Indiana, and Alabama. Those are the top 10.
But that's not the argument I was making. I was talking specifically. We were told specifically when it came to lockdowns that Florida did it the worst, correct? That they opened up. Even Trump criticized them. They opened up too fast, right? That's what we were told.
And Florida is pretty middle of the road here, just by these.
Correct. Where's New York when it comes to Florida per capita deaths?
Let me look.
It's like within 1 or 2 states, isn't it?
New York. No, it's
Are you looking at per capita?
Florida is actually. I'm looking at death rate. Yeah. Florida is actually lower than New York by like 10. So New York's way up there.
Okay.
As opposed to Florida.
But again, so that's what we're told.
Just from the numbers I'm looking at.
Yes. So I don't know, like, again, I'm for the sake of argument, I believe what I read when I looked at these was they were close. The point is we were told the exact opposite. Here's the argument that no one had, right? No one said, hey, you know what? Our death rate could be 0.5 percentage point or something lower if we completely lock down. However, the result of that will be economic devastation that we'll be dealing with for years on end afterwards. And people will die of other diseases more because of these lockdowns. And children, because of the lockdowns, are going to suffer mental health crises and suicide rate. No one told us that. They said either lock down or you want grandma to die. That's what they told us. So you would expect with such a draconian policy that you would expect to see the justification would be, look at how many lives were saved. We'll easily be able to point to the places that locked down and say, look how much better they did. But we can't do that. We can't do that on a state-to-state level, and we certainly can't do that on a country-by-country level. Because again, go ahead.
Yeah, just for my viewers, I put the link to the data I used in the chat, so you can check it out for yourself, make sure I'm not lying. Okay, carry on.
So anyways, that's the point. So I just don't believe the fundamental, and like, it never made sense to me. Of course, if you shut down the world economy, there's going to be severe impacts for years to come, which is now we're reaping those benefits, you know? And we sowed this devastation, and who wins in this exchange? Well, it's not poor people that are struggling more and more. It's the wealthy. The wealthy's doing just fine. They're doing great. You know, Stephen Colbert, I remember he was saying, we could lock down. It wouldn't bother me if we locked down if gas went to $80 a gallon. Of course it wouldn't, Stephen. Of course. It would bother me and all. You're a truck driver, right, Alex? That'd bother you. Like, we're not wealthy people. We're regular people. The people I know, you know, I think the median income in my county is like $35,000. Everybody's struggling. Everybody's struggling. And the idea that we're continually told, no, everything's going swimming, it's not true. And these policies were endorsed by Joe Biden. The idea that he would have done better, again, he had, what was the single best thing that Biden did regarding COVID? Go ahead, Alex.
I'm sorry. No. You cut out. What was your question? You cut out.
What do you find was the single most effective or best thing that Biden did regarding COVID? What was his plan that you liked?
Pushing out the vaccinations. I thought that was great because they said that he was never not going to be able to push out 100 million doses, and he was able to do that like twofold. Actually, they challenged him to do that, and I thought that was great because the vaccines work essentially. I mean, people could say, "Oh, well, that's not true." They do work.
I'm not going to get into a debate on whether or not vaccines work, but I'll say this: like YouTube, we're saying vaccines are the bomb. Don't worry, right? But
whoa, yeah, careful.
I mean, you can have for the sake of argument, that's fine, right? So let's concede that vaccines were the best thing. Okay. So first off, we're saying Biden did better than Trump because Biden said that it was impossible for Trump to have them out by April, which is exactly what happened. So they were created in a time frame that almost every expert and Democrat told us was impossible. Mm-hmm. And that was because of Trump's Operation Warp Speed.
Yes and no, actually, because Trump tried to take credit for something because Pfizer was actually producing the vaccines. Now, Trump said Operation Warp Speed, but Pfizer even said that this had nothing to do with Warp Speed. We just kind of like, we created the vaccine because we were going through trials and tribulations. But I think you mentioned at the beginning, I mean, we don't want to go too much into this, I know, but like you did bring up that like Joe Biden says and Kamala Harris said they weren't going to take the vaccine. They said that they weren't going to take the vaccine because Trump said that the vaccine. They said we're going to trust the experts. That's. I just want to get a clarification on that. So
we'll get to that in a second. So Trump, it got created under Trump in a time frame that the Democrats, including Biden, told us was impossible. When Trump went out of office, they were sending out about 1 million doses a day. Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Now Biden did up that. He almost doubled that at one point. Biden did.
Yeah.
Right. But that hardly seems like, oh, we're going to give Biden credit. Biden did such a better job than Trump because under Trump, the entire vaccine was created and then 1 million doses a day came out. And we were told by the experts on the Democrat side, not only would 1 million a day not be coming out, but it would be impossible for the vaccine would be created. And so all Biden did was like, let's get more trucks out there.
Yeah. I mean, that still is like a positive thing. I mean, we have to agree. That's actually a good thing though, isn't it?
Well, you could say it's positive, but I hardly think that you say that Biden did something extraordinary. He just took what was the natural progression of it took time to develop the vaccine. All of that happened before him. And he just said, okay, now let's get more of them. That's not like what is the mind, what is the great skill that Biden needed to achieve that? Nothing. And then the other thing is you mentioned, right, the idea that people were distrusting. Because of Trump, people were distrusting. Well, if the vaccine was the thing you think's the most important, can you show me one time of Trump ever criticizing the vaccines?
He said he encouraged people to take the vaccine, and then people booed him for it, essentially. Like his own crowd booed him for it.
Okay, but we're not talking about Trump supporters versus Biden supporters.
But I just want to clarify.
We're talking about Trump versus Biden. So I'm asking you, you can't show me, to your knowledge, even when he's being booed by his own crowd, Trump has continued to tout the vaccines. You can't show me one example otherwise.
I'd have to look it up though, but I don't have you have me on that one.
I've not found it. In fact,
okay.
Yeah.
And finish up. We do have to.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll say this, but I could find them of Biden and Harris. I could find them criticizing it. And I know you're going to say, well, that's because they said they didn't trust Trump. Right. Biden even said at one point, he said, are you going to want to be the first person to take this vaccine that comes out under Trump? Now, you don't think that damage. In fact, one of the groups that was least likely to take the vaccine initially by race, do you know which group by race was least likely to take it?
Which one?
Do you have a guess?
No.
I know.
Wick, go ahead.
African Americans.
That's right.
Yeah.
Do you think most of them are Trump voters or not?
I say most of them are Democrat.
Right. And so now they're listening to the guy that they're going to end up voting for saying, you going to be the one to put this in your body first? And then all of a sudden, mysteriously, as soon as Biden and Harris win the election, they're like, never mind, vaccines, we now trust them. Oh, and by the way, you should be forced to take it. Meanwhile, not one person at the CDC, at any organization resigned when Trump was there because they felt pressured of Trump rushing the vaccine. But we can't say the same of the Biden administration, which two people from I forget the agency that was in charge of verifying whether or not the boosters were allowed, resigned because they thought the Biden administration was meddling, forcing them to approve boosters before they were ready.
Okay, so I know we're really getting into it now, but
I know. It's okay.
We have some time constraints, and I do want to do two things before we end. One is which I have a simple question for both of you.
Sure.
That I'd like you to answer, and I do want to read my super chats, get some money, and then we'll go to closing statements. Sound good, gang?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, great. So the question I have, and we'll start with Rob, and then we'll go to Alex. Regardless of how you think the economy is or isn't, right? So setting that aside, what policy would you like to see whoever is elected, whether it be Trump or Biden, implement that you think would be healthy to help the economy grow? What is your number one economic policy that you would vouch for or try to promote as should be passed into law? Go ahead.
Secure the border, stop illegal immigration, and massively reduce the size of the federal government.
Okay. Alex, same question.
I wouldn't say reduce the size of federal government. I want it to be functional. We've got way too much discourse going on right now. It's not about what's best for the American people. It's just best about like appeasing one particular party or whatnot.
Okay, but what do you want? What is a positive actual legislation or policy that you'd like to see implemented or passed by whoever wins that you think would be healthy for the economy? Go ahead.
It's kind of a tough one, honestly. I would actually like to see damn, you caught me on a tough one. I'd say for right now, more infrastructure. I'm all about infrastructure. I want to see more infrastructure stuff and actually being done. That's my biggest topic though.
I swear to God, I almost said just say infrastructure. I love that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because the problem with
we'll have to get on this. Yeah, we'll have to get
it's a big one. I debated someone once that I was like, look, the infrastructure bill includes all this crazy shit teaching feminist studies, whatever. And I debated a person said, but that is infrastructure. Because, and I'll ask you the same question. Do you agree with that? Is that infrastructure, sending money to schools for things like that?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Good. This person said yes. And I said, can you name me one thing that's not infrastructure? They were unable to do so. Which, that's the problem with infrastructure. It's an easy thing to say. More infrastructure. Okay, I guess. Bridges and roads are falling apart here. That's true. But no one ever does anything. We keep sending more and more money and it never gets fixed,
Yeah, froze for a second. So, but anyway.
Beautiful. Okay, I think we've covered it. And people can judge whether or not who they think did well, who they think did poorly, where they did. Let me get through these super chats and we'll get to closing statements.
Sure.
So first of all, from 2024, A Gay Odyssey, for $2 to ask, can you ask the panel what happens to the January 6th hostages? His words, not mine.
I think anyone who committed a nonviolent crime should have their sentence commuted. They should be given a small fine like the people that broke in under Kavanaugh. The people that committed violence should be treated commiserately with the people that were engaged in the May 31st, 2020 insurrection, which was basically people being left off the hook. I have no love. On January 6th, the day of it, I was streaming that day. It was the due date of my son. I was streaming in the car. I condemned the violence I saw immediately. There certainly were people that were Trump supporters that acted with violence. I condemn that, but it is clear that this has been used as a witch hunt to go after people that support Donald Trump and to increase the authoritarianism of the Biden administration and the administrative state. And those people have been treated incredibly harshly, and history will not look back fondly on the authoritarianism that's been used to go after these nonviolent people.
Any comments on that?
I would definitely say that there were people there that the people that actually were considered nonviolent, like Pam Hemphill, she actually was there at that point. She does believe that she paid the price, and she does believe that there are people that were nonviolent that should get the same equal treatment. There are people that admit under oath, under penalty of perjury, that what they did was wrong, and then they would come out a few months later and say, "Oh my God, I am just a political prisoner." I don't buy that, honestly, of them saying that they're political prisoners. The people went there on January 6th for one specific reason, because they were essentially told to, hey, yeah, the election is being stolen, and if you don't act, you're gonna lose your country. Essentially, yeah, he might have said peace once or twice, but he basically scared these people into thinking that they were gonna lose their country. There were people there that went there to attack, and they wanted to cause harm to Mike Pence and to Nancy Pelosi and whatnot. These people are we can say, oh well, what about this? What about this? What about this? We need to focus on January 6th. It was a horrible day. Definitely a horrible day. And I'm glad, Rob says, hey, the people that caused violence, they should be held accountable. Yes. But the people, even if they were nonviolent, they still interrupted a session of Congress. They still, damaged, equipment inside there. It's part of our, if they can say if it's our house, whatnot. Some of these crimes that they committed, yes, they get their due punishment. I don't think they've been treated any differently than other people that have had the same crime, essentially. But I'm just going to leave it. I could go on for days about that. But
this is important, if you don't mind, real quick. Interrupting Congress, interrupting a congressional act. What do you think the punishment for that should be?
I don't know.
Carry on.
I don't know, because I'm not a legal scholar.
Why
so
didn't Jamal Bowman get that punishment when he pulled a firearm to stump?
Why didn't Jamal Bowman?
Yeah.
I have no idea. Honestly, I think he should have. Yeah, he should have been. I honestly think over that, I thought that was the dumbest thing you could possibly do. And I don't buy his excuse saying, "Oh, I didn't know that was." Everybody knows it's a fucking fire alarm. It's the dumbest excuse ever. I'm gonna be honest about that, if that's okay.
Right, but you don't see the double standard, the pro-Palestinian protesters that are breaking in. You think any of them are going to get even remotely near the sentences that nonviolent January 6 people got?
I don't know. It's possible, but
there
I have
was
no idea.
No arrest the other day.
But January 6th and a fire alarm are two completely different situations, especially context definitely matters. But I don't want to get too much. You and I can have a conversation about it some other time.
The problem, I'll just say real quick, the problem is we're not talking about two different situations. We're talking about the same crime, interrupting a session of Congress. If you're saying, but there were people on January 6th that did far worse than that. Agreed. Right. But we're talking about an individual that did nothing more than the crime you could isolate as interrupting a session of Congress. You seem to say that's an important thing. and they need to be held accountable. My question is, we see this from the left all the time, and it seems like there's never accountability. I mean, just this week we saw these Palestinian protesters, no one arrested.
I didn't see that one, but so I can't comment on that. So
I mean, there's a video I saw of Palestinian press. I've seen a lot of them getting arrested. I don't know if they've been charged.
Well, Capital City
but I've seen a
Police
lot.
and I think Secret Service both said there were 0 arrests this weekend when they were
I have no
defacing
idea.
the statue and all of that.
Up. Just for the sake of argument, I didn't see it, so I can't comment on the matter if that's fair. So
That's fair.
Yep.
Sorry.
Okay, let's keep going. No, it's fine. Let's keep going. $5 from the Trib One. Trump saying both our voting subsystem and justice system are rigged is evidence for him directly trying to poison the well on our democracy. $2 from the Trib also to say Rob making it seem like the FBI has 10 people in it.
It's the
Cryborn.
leadership. Show me. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me get through it, so we're going to go all day. $5 from Cryborn to say 2 girls, 1 cup, and Americans are the ones who have to drink. Okay.
I'm sorry, that was hilarious.
$2 from Cryborn to say no regulations. Why government? No regulate prices. $5 from Turtle Emergency. If you can't logically credit Trump for the vaccines, but not hold him responsible for Afghanistan, this is completely contradictory, batshit reasoning.
It's not true at all, right?
You want to address that real quick?
Vaccines. I'll ask you this, Alex. Is it objectively true that vaccines existed when Trump left?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you envision a world where Biden would have came into office and said, "Yeah, I'm not beholden to Trump's pullout. I could do what I want."
He could have, but then the Taliban could have fought against our troops essentially, so that's why he had to stick to it essentially. So
That's what he didn't have to, right? And that's why you can say
kinda did.
No, that's
He
not
kinda
true
did.
at all. That's not true at all.
It is.
It is.
It is.
not
I mean,
true. What do you think would have happened if he didn't?
if he didn't stick the timetable, the Taliban could have attacked our troops essentially. They say, hey, these guys, they fucking backed out of the agreement, so now we're gonna.
They could have What do you think they could have done? Like freed ISIS-K that would have bombed our troops? Oh
Yeah,
wait,
they
that
could have done a
happened.
number of things.
That's what happened.
Yeah, but
They wanted
we're
us
talking
out.
about, we're talking
the
about
idea if we would
they're
have
talking
said
about the Taliban though.
the idea that they could have said two things could have happened. One, it could have been the same timetable, and Biden could have been working up into it instead of the people he put in charge later admitting under oath there was 0 plan. He literally threw us there the day of, so he could have been planning the whole way up there. Or second, he could have negotiated with the Taliban and said, "We're gonna have to push this back 1 or 2 months because I need to get a plan in order to make sure
That
we
was the
get
cutoff
everything
date.
out of it." What's that?
That was the cutoff. The Taliban gave him that cutoff date, essentially. So, like, if they could have,
It's an absurd argument. It's an absurd argument to say of all the things that Biden scrapped. No, that's just it. If he wouldn't, that would have been it. Everything would have went to pot. I mean, I don't understand how it could have went worse than it already did.
it could have gone worse than one number was, but look, I don't want to get into it. Like, you and I can have a conversation later on if that's okay. So.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
$5 from Cryborn to say, can Rob tell us about where he's from, policies that have impacted his area,
dogs.
and how that affects his beliefs?
Yeah, I'll
up
be
to you.
quick. I'm from a county called Clarion, Pennsylvania. It's in rural Pennsylvania. I've lived in the same 20-mile radius my entire life. I've personally seen jobs around here. Like, for example, I can tell you one job that affects policy. Regulations on truck driving, insane. My father-in-law drives oversized load. You would not believe the regulations from state to state. They started to put these like computerized systems into the trucks that say that you can only drive certain amounts of time, which has led to all sorts of problems in the trucking industry that he's dealt with. Most of the land around here was farming land. I've seen it go from when I was a young boy, a bunch of small family-owned farms around here, to now there's only like 2 or 3 families that own farms. Bigger corporations and corporate farms have come in and bought that stuff out. I've seen almost every manufacturing job in the area leave. The biggest in the town of Clarion that's near to where I live, the biggest job was a glass bottle manufacturing plant that made glass bottles for things like beer. That went out maybe 12 years ago. My dad worked at a window factory his entire life. He went in on a Tuesday. They closed down on a Friday. They said, pack up your stuff. So, yeah, I've seen how these policies and ineptitude has really screwed over rural America, and people are hurting here. I've seen opioid deaths go through the roof. I've seen addiction go through the roof. Suicides go through the roof. So it's not a pretty picture economically where I'm at. It's a beautiful landscape. And the people around here are the salt of the earth. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But certainly the policies have forgotten where I'm at. And not only do the economic policies forget where we're at, but we're treated like shit. We're treated like no one speaks up for people in rural America. Who gives a shit? No one cares. We're flyover country. We're told that we're the great enemy. So when you have corporations like Nike sponsoring Black Lives Matter, who are they revolting against? They're not at Martha's Vineyard, the people that run shit. They're not there. They're not at Washington. They're burning down inner city homes saying the bad guys are MAGA voters. The only reason people around here voted for MAGA is because Trump was the first person in 30 years of national politics that actually said a positive word about us. So that's that. No one understands. It's not that the policies that Trump did. It's that finally someone treated us like we weren't pieces of shit. Just 10-tooth rubes, as Rick Wilson said, a bunch of racists. It couldn't be further from the truth. Some of these people, I was excited to debate Alex when I found out he was a truck driver. Those are the people I respect most in life. Like, I suck at that shit. But when I see these blue-collar workers that bust their ass 50, 60, 70 hours a week, and they're treated like shit, like that they're the problem with this country, it infuriates me. And so that's where I get the positions I come from.
No, I don't think I don't think blue collar people are necessarily treated like shit. Essentially, I think that's kind of like but that's I don't want to get again. You and I will talk some other time because I'd like to have another conversation with you. So
yeah, that's fine.
$2 from 2024 a Gay Odyssey to say based Rob. Much love for speaking on the January 6th. Gang, thank you for your time and attention. I do appreciate it. I know that you have a lot of options of where you can come to get your content, and I thank you that you come to me. And I want to thank both Rob and Alex for thinking of me when it comes to moderation. I do appreciate it. Makes me feel good. I like it. Gang, if you like this content, hit that like and subscribe button in the description. I've linked to both of these wonderful individuals' channels. You should probably give them a follow if you're watching me from... If you are first being introduced to either of these people by watching my show, then please go give them a follow and a subscribe as well. They're both great people. With that, I want to give each of these these wonderful individuals an outro and give your closing and final thoughts, and then we'll just wrap it up for the night. Cool?
Yep.
We're gonna start with Rob, and we're gonna let Alex have the last word. Rob, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I thank both of you for being here. I know I'm feeling a little under the weather, but I thought it went swimmingly. Thank God I didn't have to yell or scream or anything like that. So good for that. Yeah, as far as the debate goes, I think that the areas we covered, I was cognizant that I've had this debate several times, so I wanted to sort of talk about the issues that Alex wanted to focus on. So I hope that Alex feels that he got to talk about most of the things that he wanted to talk about. I think that my impression of this is I think that I clearly made my case, I think, significantly that what I started off saying, objectively, the country was better under Trump, particularly in 2019, than it is under Biden now. I think that stands. I think that the issues we hit on shows that, the idea, foreign policy-wise, I think it's just, as Alex concedes, that, the world is not more stable today than it was under Trump. When it comes to the issues of corruption and damaging democracy, I mean, I don't know what to say. I got a concession that I'm shocked to get, that if Merrick Garland doesn't get jailed for contempt of Congress, which he was voted, that it proves the corruption and two-tier of the system. I'll be interested to talk to Alex right before the election because I'm 99.9% sure that Merrick Garland ain't going to send himself to jail and there ain't going to be clamoring from the DOJ to do that. So we'll see if he holds that position going in there. But I think I do a good job of arguing on sort of the corruption of these institutions and how it's sort of projection. They're afraid that Trump will do to them what they've done to Trump and Trump supporters. That's what it is. And then, when it comes to sort of the economic debate and the domestic debate, I think that quite clearly we could see how bad and grim the situation's getting, and there's this rosy picture that's being painted. I do put some of the blame at the feet of Republicans and Trump, but I think that overwhelmingly it was sort of these institutions, the Democrats and Biden's policies that made these things worse. You can find me at Normal America with Rob Noor on YouTube, Rob Noor spelled Noerr on almost any other platform. Usually stream Wednesday, Thursday, Friday evenings around 8 p.m. Eastern. But lately, work's been keeping me a little longer, so just catch me when I'm on. Thanks so much to both of you again. Look forward to hearing your outro. So.
Okay.
Yep.
Gang, give him a follow. He's great. We like him. We vociferously disagree with some of the points he made tonight, but I'm the moderator. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to facilitate discussions. With that, though, Alex, close us out.
So first things first, I want to thank Wick for moderating this debate. I thought this was a really good debate. Rob, thank you so much for agreeing to this. I think this was good. This was a good debate. I think it's important for us to have like this kind of discourse. I mean, because some people like the blood sports, some people like the shouting. I only shout when I feel like the person is like bad faith. But I felt like, Rob and I had good faith discussion. We didn't agree on much, but that's okay. I think that this is really, really important to have some of that, even if you don't agree, to have these conversations, because it kind of sees things from different points of view. So here's the thing. There's a lot of things I feel like we could have covered, but Rob was gracious enough to let me talk about things I want to talk about as well, which is good. I felt like hopefully I gave him the chance to like make his points. Yes, I did concede, but I think the thing we need to focus on the most is like there's a lot more issues, and like we didn't get a chance to talk about it, about like why I'm still voting for Biden. Like there's I could go on for days about this, but I've only got so much time. But the fact of the matter is like things aren't pretty, but they are going to get better. Things tend to get worse, like the night is darkest more, whatever, some happy horse shit. But we've been through worse in this country. We're going to come out on top of this eventually. Like, it just takes time for something like this to take place. And I want people to understand that, things might be tough like right now, but the fact of the matter is things will get better. You just have to like kind of persevere through it. Like, get up every morning, go to work. Like, some people just don't feel hope about it, but it just takes some time to get these things taken care of. There are some great policies. Like, I didn't give a chance to talk about like, the overall, relief that Biden has given people, like with their health care and whatnot. We didn't get a chance to talk about the, $35 insulin, but I don't want to like kind of rehash these things, but Biden's policies domestically have been great. And I feel like will only get better as the year progresses. Do I still think like if somebody breaks a session of Congress, like if Steve Bannon's going to go to prison, then yes, got to remain consistent about that. But I don't want to go too much further into it because like I'll be here all day. You can find me every Saturday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I host a podcast called Current Events on Tap. Rob, you're invited to that. What I do is I bring one or two guests on. We talk beer and I pick two current events of the week, and then my guest picks two current events of the week. It could be whatever current event they want to, what's going on. We both give an assessment upon it. It's a very chill format, very laid back. I try to encourage everybody to have a good time, but this Friday I'm going to be interviewing Clint St. Mosley, who's running for the 9th Congressional District in the state of Michigan. He's running against Lisa McClain. I'll be doing that on my platform as well. So once again, Wick, thank you for hosting this. Rob, thank you for the opportunity. I hope everybody had a great time. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Gang, if you want to see more Wick content, tomorrow I'm actually going on someone else's stream. I'm not going to be streaming it, but Timothy Imholt of D&D fame, who runs an AI company, has invited me on his platform, and I'll be tweeting out links to this, to talk about gatekeeping in role-playing games. And so it's not politics, but it's blood sports nonetheless. Check it out.
Is it going to be how you nerds don't leave us non-nerds in? Is that what it's going to be?
Exactly. Why we gatekeep to keep out the tourists, okay? Bastards. The people who want to come into our hobby and try to rearrange the furniture to suit their needs. Look, you don't like it, stay away, right? If you like it, don't change it. But anyway, with that, we're going to rate out. I love you all. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
See you
guys.
later.